first rule of the road is simple. Don't pick up strangers. It's the kind of advice passed down in whispers at gas stations, muttered in truck stop diners over cold coffee, written in the scars of those who ignored it. My father said it once when I was 16, and the way his voice cracked told me it wasn't just a saying, it was a warning, and yet warnings fade in the dark. That night, the highway stretched endless and lonely, asphalt slick with mist, yellow lines glowing faint under the blood moon that hung swollen above the trees. The hum of the engine was my only companion. Steady, but hollow, like a heart that knew it was beating alone. I had hours to go before I reached the next town and miles of silence to wrestle with. Then I saw her. At first I thought it was a trick of the fog, a pale shape shifting between the shadows at the roadside, but then she stepped forward. A woman, thin, tall, her hair tangled like black ropes in the wind. She stood with one arm outstretched, thumb raised, the oldest signal in the world. Hitchhiker. Every instinct screamed at me to keep driving. The rule, my father's voice, my gut twisting with something ancient. But loneliness has a way of muting wisdom, curiosity has a way of taking the wheel, and guilt, because what kind of man leaves someone stranded on a road like this? That guilt dug its claws deeper than fear. I slowed. The tires hissed on wet asphalt, her face tilted toward me, and in the flash of my headlights, I saw the faintest smile, not warmth, not gratitude, just a curl at the corner of her mouth, like she'd been waiting. When she climbed into the cab, the temperature dropped. The smell hit first. Metallic, sharp, like blood rinsed over iron. She shut the door slowly, fingers lingering too long on the handle. We didn't speak at first. The silence in the cab was thicker than the fog outside. Then she asked me where I was headed. Her voice was low, too low, like something coiled in her throat. I gave her the name of the town. She didn't nod, didn't smile again, just stared at the windshield, as if the road ahead was already hers. I told myself I'd done the right thing, that she was just another traveler. But my father's voice echoed in the back of my mind, louder now. Don't pick up strangers, not after midnight, not under the red moon. Because sometimes the passenger isn't human at all. If you felt the chill of that first howl, stay with us, subscribe before the night takes you. The cab should have felt safer with another soul inside, but it didn't. Her presence was heavy, like a weight pressing against the glass. I kept my hands on the wheel, eyes pinned to the endless stripe of road, pretending that everything was fine. She hadn't said much since asking where I was headed, and maybe silence would have been better than what came next. "Do you believe the road remembers?" she asked suddenly. Her voice wasn't casual. It wasn't small talk. It was a test. The words hung in the air, vibrating like the hum of the tires. I told her I didn't know what she meant. She laughed, but it wasn't human. Not really. It was dry, almost cracking, like something trying to mimic the sound. She turned her face toward me, and for the first time I noticed how pale she was, not the pallor of someone sick, but of something untouched by sun, by warmth, by life. Her hair clung damp against her neck, and her eyes, God, her eyes, were the color of storm clouds, rimmed with red, darting quick to the rearview mirror as though checking for the moon. The smell inside the cab was growing worse, metallic, wet, a butcher's floor, I told myself. Maybe it was just the engine leaking oil, or the road spraying iron-rich water? But no, it was coming from her, from the folds of her jacket, dark and stiff like it had been soaked in something. I asked her where she was headed, hoping to reset the balance. She smiled, baring teeth that seemed too sharp in the dim light. "Anywhere the moon will follow," she said. The air inside the truck seemed thinner after that. I cracked the window, desperate for breath, but the fog pressed in, curling inside like fingers. I drove faster, though I couldn't say why. That's when I noticed her hand. The nails weren't painted, but they were dark, clotted, sharp, curling against the leather seat. I swear they looked longer than when she got in. I gripped the wheel tighter. She leaned closer, her breath damp against my neck. You know what they say about picking up a stranger? I froze. She shouldn't have known that rule, not unless she'd been waiting for me to break it. They say the blood you spill on the road doesn't go away. The road drinks it, and it always comes back to collect. Her words twisted something inside me, like she was reciting scripture from a book older than the asphalt itself. The truck shuddered, as if the road itself had heard her. That was the moment I realized this wasn't about kindness. This wasn't about giving someone a ride. This was about survival, and I was already losing. Some of you know this legend already. Comment if you've heard whispers of this curse before. I'd been gripping the wheel so tight my knuckles were bone white, but even that wasn't enough to keep me steady when she shifted in the seat. It wasn't a normal adjustment, not the way people fidget on long drives. It was something deeper, like her body was rearranging itself. I heard it before I saw it. A low crack, wet and sharp, followed by the creak of leather as she pressed back into the seat. Her breath grew louder, ragged, trembling at first, then steady, heavy, like an animal pacing behind glass. I tried to glance without making it obvious, but the moon helped me. The red light broke through the fog just right, flooding the cab for a split second. And that's when I saw her jaw hinge. Too far. The skin of her cheek stretched, her fangs glinted as they elongated. I slammed my foot on the gas. The truck roared forward, but it didn't matter. She was already turning. The cracking got worse, bone snapping against bone like branches breaking underfoot. Her hands, once pale, sprouted claws that tore through the vinyl seat. She dragged one lazily across the leather, and the sound was so sharp it cut through my skull like a scream. I begged myself not to look again, but I did. Her eyes had gone full amber, glowing like hot coals. The woman was gone. In her place sat something, shaped mid-shift, caught between flesh and fur, and she was smiling wider now, like she was enjoying every second of my terror. The truck began to fill with the stink of wet fur and blood. My own pulse thundered so loud I could barely hear the engine. She moved faster than I thought possible. One claw slashed across the dashboard, gauges sparking as the plastic split. She leaned across the console toward me, jaws gaping wider than any human mouth should. I jerked the wheel hard, trying to shake her off balance. The tires screamed against the asphalt, and for a moment the cab tilted like we'd roll. I thought maybe it would throw her back, but instead she laughed, a sound so deep it rattled my ribs. Then the first real attack came. Her clawed hand shot forward, grazing my arm, not just cutting, searing, like her touch carried the heat of the curse itself. I howled in pain as blood slicked down my sleeve. I swung at her with my free hand, hitting nothing but bristling fur and bone. She didn't flinch. She only pressed closer, lips curling back until saliva dripped onto the steering wheel. "This road is yours to die on," she hissed, though her voice was warped, layered with a growl that wasn't human. The truck swerved, again, horn blaring as if the machine itself felt the terror coursing through it. My chest heaved, lungs burning, mind screaming to wake up from the nightmare. But this wasn't a nightmare. This was the cost of breaking the rule, and I knew I wouldn't survive long if I stayed inside with her, if the snap of bone made you wince, hit like, and let the algorithm know you survived. I knew I had only one chance: stay in the cab, and I was dead. Her claws raked across the dashboard again, gouging deep grooves into plastic and steel. Sparks spat, filling the truck with the acrid stench of burning wires. I yanked the wheel and made my choice: survival over sanity. I threw the truck off the road. The tires shrieked as they bit into mud and gravel. The headlights bounced wildly, slicing through trees, before the world lurched sideways. The sound of metal folding in on itself was deafening. Glass exploded, showering my arms and face in tiny, stinging shards. The steering column snapped forward, the airbag bursting white against my chest, and then silence for one breath. I thought maybe I'd killed her in the crash, maybe the impact had done what I couldn't, but hope is a cruel thing, because when I opened my eyes, she wasn't gone. She was crawling across the shattered windshield, her body twisted, bones still shifting with wet cracks. Her claws dug into the hood of the truck as she pulled herself free of the wreck like a spider escaping its web. Her head snapped toward me, hair hanging in blood-matted ropes. I kicked the door with everything I had. Once, twice. The third hit broke it open, and I spilled out into the mud, lungs on fire, shoulder screaming with pain. The forest swallowed me in darkness. Fog coiled low, wrapping my ankles as I staggered forward. Branches clawed at my face. My heart thundered, each beat louder than the crunch of leaves underfoot. But behind me, closer, closer, came the growls. She wasn't limping. She wasn't wounded. If anything, the crash had accelerated her change. Each breath she drew in was a snarl. Each exhale a promise. I didn't dare look back, but I could feel her eyes. Hot amber fixed on my spine. The forest opened into a clearing, pale light spilling across wet grass. I ran, every nerve screaming. My boots slipped. My body slammed into the dirt, and pain shot up my leg. I clawed forward on my hands, desperate to rise. Her howl tore through the trees, not the cry of a wolf, not the scream of a woman. Something caught between, jagged, broken, ancient. The sound rattled the marrow in my bones. I forced myself up, stumbling toward the tree line on the other side. My breath came in ragged gasps, clouding the air. Every step I took was answered by her crashing through the brush, claws raking bark, jaws snapping just out of sight, and then silence. That was worse than the chase because silence meant she was closer, waiting. I slowed, heart hammering, eyes darting across the tree line. Nothing, only fog, only trees, only the blood moon above, staring down like an unblinking eye. Then a shadow moved low and fast. She burst from the brush, all fur and fang, her body almost fully changed. I barely had time to throw myself aside. As she landed where I'd been, claws sinking into the earth, jaws snapping inches from my throat, I scrambled backward, palms bleeding, the earth cold and wet. Her amber eyes locked on mine, and her grin split wide. No trace of humanity left. Where would you run if glowing eyes stared through your window? Tell me below. I want to see who would survive. The clearing wasn't wide enough, and the trees seemed to close in the farther I stumbled. My lungs were knives, each gasp cutting deeper than the last. She circled now instead of charging, pacing the edge of the fog like a predator savoring the hunt. Her form was nearly complete, spine arched, fur bristling black, jaw stretched into a muzzle, but worse than the sight was her voice. Because it hadn't vanished, it clung like a ghost to her growls, whispering between the cracks of her teeth. "You shouldn't have stopped," she rasped. "The road takes what it's owed." I froze, chest heaving. Her words weren't random. They were ritual. In the distance, the wreck of my truck hissed as fluids leaked into the mud, steam rising like incense. For a moment I thought I heard more voices, thin, layered, carried on the wind. Not hers, not mine, others, dozens, maybe hundreds, murmuring the same phrase over and over. The road takes what it's owed. That's when it struck me. This wasn't just one monster. This was older, deeper. The road itself was cursed. Every hitchhiker, every shadow thumb raised under the moonlight wasn't a coincidence. It was a lure, a contract. The asphalt fed on blood, and she was its collector. Her claws scraped bark as she leaned close to a tree, her amber eyes never leaving me. "They buried the first one in the foundations," she said, voice thick with growl. "A woman who walked these woods before the road cut them apart. She died under a red moon, and her blood sank into the dirt. Every mile laid after carried the stain. Every traveler is hers now." I staggered back. My father's warning, suddenly I understood. He hadn't told me why not to pick up strangers, only that I shouldn't. He knew the road's hunger, but he thought silence might protect me. He was wrong. She crept closer, claws carving lines into the soil, her grin splitting wider. "You carried me across the threshold," she whispered. "Now the debt is yours to pay." The air grew colder, the fog tighter, and I felt it then. The road beneath me wasn't just dirt and gravel, it was alive. Each step pulsed, like a vein beating with the memory of every drop spilled. The curse wasn't just hers, it was in the ground, the trees, the very air. My blood was already part of it. The scratch on my arm throbbed, burning hotter, spreading up toward my shoulder. Her touch hadn't just wounded me, it had marked me, and suddenly I knew. If I didn't stop her, I wouldn't just die here, I'd become part of the road. Another shadow thumb, another voice whispering to the next fool who passed. The thought alone was worse than death. Curses like this don't end. They echo. Subscribe and join the archive before the next howl. The fog tightened like a fist. I could hear her circling, claws sinking into wet earth, tails swishing through the brush. Every muscle in my body screamed for flight, but I knew running was over. This had to end here. My eyes darted to the wrecked truck in the distance, smoke rising faint and blue through the trees. The twisted steel glittered under the blood moon. I remembered the toolbox rattling under the passenger seat before the crash. If it hadn't been thrown into the ditch, it might still be there. My only chance. I bolted, not away from her, but toward the wreck. Her howl tore the night asunder the moment she realized what I was doing. It was rage and hunger fused into one unholy sound, and it drove into me like a spike. Branches lashed at my arms as I sprinted, lungs burning, the cut on my shoulder searing with every breath. I reached the truck, half buried in mud. One headlight, glowing weak and crooked. My hands tore at the bent passenger door, ripping skin on jagged steel until my palms bled. With a final heave it gave, and the toolbox tumbled into the dirt. She hit me before I could open it. The impact was like being crushed by a falling tree. My body slammed into the ground, the wind ripped from my chest. Her jaws snapped inches from my throat, saliva burning hot against my skin. I threw my forearm. Between us, claws tearing flesh as I screamed. Her weight was unbearable, every muscle corded with inhuman strength. But instinct and terror can make a man stronger than he ever knew. My free hand clawed at the toolbox, fingers closing around cold metal. I yanked it open and grabbed the first thing I felt, a tire iron. With a howl of my own, I swung. The iron connected with a sickening crack. Her muzzle snapped sideways and, for the first time, she reeled. Blood sprayed black in the moonlight, spattering my face and chest. She snarled, but the sound wavered. I struck again and again, each blow a prayer and a curse. Her claws raked my side, tearing through fabric and skin, but I didn't stop. The iron bent in my hands, but still I swung until her body heaved back. Her eyes, those burning amber eyes, locked on mine, fury and recognition mingling, not just hunger now, hatred. She lunged again. Jaws wide, I jammed the broken tire iron into her throat. Her momentum drove it deep, splitting bone and sinew with a wet crack. Her scream was unearthly, not human, not wolf. Something older, primal. The road itself roaring through her lungs. She thrashed, claws gouging trenches in the earth, mud and blood spraying as she convulsed. And then, silence, her body crumpled. Half woman, half wolf, the shift incomplete, the curse fought to finish its work. But the steel in her throat pinned her between worlds. Her chest heaved once, twice, then stilled. I collapsed beside her, gasping, every nerve on fire. The fog thinned around me, retreating like smoke after a blaze. For the first time all night, I could see stars beyond the blood moon, but the silence wasn't victory. It was warning, because as the wind shifted I heard it again. The whispers, dozens of voices, low and unyielding. The road takes what it's owed, and I realized I might have killed her, but the curse wasn't finished. This isn't the last transformation. The next one is worse. Follow the howl to the story waiting on screen. The forest was still again. I sat in the mud, blood seeping warm down my arm, chest hitching with shallow breaths. The truck was a ruin behind me, its headlight fading, smoke curling skyward like an unholy incense, and beside me lay her body, or what was left of it, even dead. She wasn't at rest. The shift had frozen her in some grotesque half-state, one arm still human, pale and thin, while the other was nothing but sinew and claw. Her face was split, one side soft and sharp-boned, the other furred and snarling, fangs protruding past her lips. It was as though the curse had been interrupted mid-sentence. I wanted to believe it was over, that I'd stopped her, that I'd beaten the night at its own game. But the whispers in the fog told me otherwise. They hadn't gone silent. They drifted. Through the trees, faint but insistent, voices overlapping like old radio static. The road takes what it's owed. The road takes what it's owed. I staggered to my feet, every bone aching, every muscle trembling. My arm throbbed where her claw had opened me, the wound burning hotter with each passing moment. I tore a strip from my shirt and bound it tight. But the sting wasn't just pain. It pulsed. Like a second heartbeat, I stumbled toward the road. The fog was thinner now, the blood moon lower, sagging toward the horizon. The cracked asphalt stretched ahead, black and endless. For a moment, I thought I saw figures standing on the shoulder, shapes too thin, too still, hitchhikers, frozen in silhouette. But when I blinked, they were gone. Or maybe they'd stepped off the road to follow me. My father's warning came back to me then, clearer than it had ever been. Don't pick up strangers, not after midnight, not under the red moon. I understood now. He hadn't been talking about people. He'd been talking about the road itself, about the curse that hunts along it, waiting for the next fool to slow down. I broke the rule once and I lived, barely. But I know the truth. The road doesn't forget. It doesn't forgive. And one night when the moon bleeds again, I'll hear that thumb against the shoulder. I'll see that pale smile in the fog. And I'll remember, hell doesn't always chase you. Sometimes you open the door and let it inside. The number one rule of the road is don't pick up strangers. I broke it. And now, hell is still out there, thumbing for the next ride. The pack grows stronger with every whisper. Share this tale if you dare, and join us before the curse finds you alone. And for those who hunger for more, step deeper into the shadows with our ultimate werewolf horror playlist, linked in the description below. In the world of horror, the scariest things happen when you least expect them, and trust me, you don't want to be left in the dark. Welcome to the darkness.